Three words, how, why, what, not necessarily in that order. And it was a good reminder to me, thanks for the introduction by the way, Eddie, and welcome everyone. It's great to see so many people after so many years, in my case really. Right, three words, why, how, what. Start with why. Has anyone read anything or heard TED Talks by Simon Sinek? Anyone? Hands up? Yeah, always good. So I'm stealing unashamedly from him with why. And with this session, try and make it a little bit different. You're going to get lots of technical stuff through the day from our brilliant team. So this is more contextual, okay? So I thought it was a good opportunity to actually remind myself, and maybe without hopefully not patronising you, good idea for you to prompt yourself now and again, why do we actually do what we do every day? That why is so important, to sort of anchor ourselves to our sort of common purpose, our deeper purpose really. So our why, that's it, I'm asking myself that. Basically, these things to help our key stakeholders, well, to contribute to helping our key stakeholders achieve their objectives. That's our why. That's why we do what we do. It's really, really important. And our key stakeholders obviously are our clients, our shareholders, and our staff, our team, basically. And because of today and the setting, we're going to concentrate, unsurprisingly, on our clients. I probably should move over here, or I should remember what slide's coming up next. And, oh, yeah, it's that one. Right, our why. So helping our clients do this, all those things. I'm not going to read them through, they're pretty obvious, but that's why we're here. And hopefully you appreciate that. Thank you for those of you who are our clients. Thanks for you for those of you who are going to be our clients, hopefully. But that's what we want to help you do, those things. And you'll tell us whether we do that well enough or not. And how, the second bit, which is easy. The what is actually the easiest thing. If you think about your business, the easiest thing you can do is say what you do. It's really easy to explain that. How you do it, probably not so difficult either. The why is something I think we don't think about enough. Our how, four things contribute to our how. And I wouldn't mind betting that some of these four things are the things that you also, actually this is how we do what we do as well for our clients, whoever your clients are. So the first thing, I should know these, right? Striving to score high in the trust equation, an idea that was given to me by my youngest son, Chris, James, the other one's up there. These things. I think this is important to any business. Score high above the line and low below the line. Be credible, obviously. That's something we need to think about very carefully for our clients. Be credible, someone who's believable, who you can trust effectively. Be reliable, show up when you say you'll show up, do the things you say you're going to do, and intimacy, basically be likable, get on with people. And all that you want, if the highest you could get was 5 and the lowest you could get was 1, you'd want 5s above the line. And the thing you don't want is it being about you. It's about them. And it's a simple little test. You can apply it to your personal relationships and your business relationships, but maybe stick with the business relationships and go, actually, how do I score on this? And be honest with yourself. You want 5s above the line and 1 below the line. And you want a top score of 15. If you can get that, you are doing pretty well. So that's something we're very conscious of. Try to achieve all those things in our day-to-day life. Second thing, living the 7 habits. I'm not going to go through all these. There'll be a few book recommendations through this. Go on, they're just things that have appealed to me as books. Simon Sinek was one. This is Stephen Covey, very, very old book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Anyone read that or listened to it? Yeah, and it stands the test of time. It's really brilliant. So I won't go through. It's a bit like remembering the names of the 7 dwarfs, and you always get stuck at the 6th one or the 7th one. So the 7 habits, but be proactive. I think it's something that we take to heart at Technical Connection. Don't just wait for stuff to come to us. Go out and put stuff to people that we believe they'll be interested in, that's relatable to those people. Looking up again. Begin with the end in mind, put first things first. All of that is really simple stuff. So have a plan, know what you're doing, and do the things that are most important, and don't get distracted. Sorry if that sounds patronising. I am known as patronising tone from time to time. Interdependence, think win-win, seek first to understand, then be understood, and synergize. That win-win bit is really important, isn't it? It's great if you make money, that's fantastic, but it's not very good if it's not great value for your clients. If it's great value for your clients, but you don't make anything out of it, that's not good either. So the whole win-win is really important. Synergize, something we're very, very big on, working with other professionals. We don't pretend to know it all, so we work with other businesses. One of those other businesses in the room today, not the business, but the person who runs it, Angus Houston, who runs a business called Pavilion Road, brilliant at wills and powers of attorney, and all of that kind of stuff. Basically, I can personally recommend them because they worked on my will, basically, and did a fantastic job, and they're very relatable. So Angus is around if you want to speak to him, and you should. Don't talk about football, though, he's a Leeds fan. And continuous improvement. This is TechLink. That's the bit I should have concentrated. Really, continuous improvement, sharpen the saw. Put some time aside every day to just learn, to get better, to just keep up to date, and that is something that we obviously hope we can help you with. None of this should be revelational to you. Maintaining focus, we've all got to relate to this, haven't we? How many distractions are there every day that distract you from being focused? And certainly in our work, so this is making it very personal at Technical Connection, it's so important to have the time to be able to focus on doing something well, because some of the things that you have to do just take the time. You can't do it in 2 minutes and get it done in an email or a quick social media post. They deserve time to be spent on them. A case we were working on yesterday with Marcia, a load of time yesterday, and needed to focus on it. It was very complex. She got an answer in the end. It was brilliant work, but you couldn't have done it without focus and having the time and not being distracted by stuff all the time. Really, really important. So a book worth reading on that is Daniel Goleman, called Focus, and it's just how we all get distracted by distractions, social media intrusions, and how it's important. If you're in that world and you have products and projects to produce, then having the time to spend on them and making that time for yourself is really, really important. Hopefully that's something we try to do anyway at Technical Connection, is give our team the time that we know people need to do great work and give good answers and not just be glib, basically. There's no substitute for just having the time to focus on doing things well. And, this is where we get to the next bit, keeping the main thing, realising that our main job, back to that why point, is to help our clients do those things. Actually be relatable to their clients, be up to date, be someone who can be relied on, basically help them be good at the trust equation. So that leads us to the bit that you'd expect, oh, and of course, consumer duty. I always think this should come second, because if you're doing all those things well, and getting great scores on the trust equation, then keeping up to date and relating to your clients and being proactive, then that is serving your consumers. It's not a duty, it's something you do. It's just what you do, it's natural. So consumer duty is important, we all know that, we've all been overwhelmed with it, but if you do what is important and those fundamentals, then you will have no problem with consumer duty. That's my view, anyway. Right, and a contributor to doing those things well, you'd have heard this before if you've heard any presentations from TC, is what you do ultimately summed up in one slide. Why didn't you just use this one and not use all the others and bore us to death to get to this point, is delivering advice alpha, which is making your clients better off with you than without you. That is your role. That's how clients will test you. Am I better off with you than without you? And is it worth what I pay you, however I pay you for doing that? And a contributor to that, bringing it down, narrowing it down to today's main subject, is tax alpha. Actually, enabling clients to do things tax efficiently does improve the bottom line, does help them get to their financial objectives better and quicker. And to not deal with tax or treat it as just secondary and unimportant is a big mistake, I think, because you will be losing a lot of money for your clients. Statement of the obvious, if there ever was one. So, where are we? Just a quick look at context. As I said, you'll be getting the detail from our team, but the context. Where are we now? Where could we be going in the future? Because the future is not that far away if we're thinking future and change, and we're all subject to change all the time, but a new government. What could that mean? We're increasingly being asked that question, those questions. What happens if? I had a fairly long conversation yesterday on a biggish case, which was triggered by the client's concern about what if we have a Labour government? What could I expect? And then slightly more worrying, should I be doing anything about that now? Probably a little bit too early. So, right, the big headline is pension changes, and yeah, Claire, I'm not going to talk about those. That's down to you. Claire and Chris, the team on that. Oh God, look at that, what a horrible slide. Basically, look, where we've got to, the big news from the spring budget was pensions. Claire will be talking all about that and more in relation to pensions and retirement planning. But we all know that that strategy adopted by the government to date, and forgive me for sort of going over stuff you probably already know, is all those frozen allowances and reduced allowances, so I won't slavishly go through these, and the summaries on the next couple of slides, have a really big impact. You know, the frozen personal allowance, the frozen nil rate band, the frozen and then reduced capital gains tax allowance and the dividend allowance, all those things, the CGT exception, all of that seems quite innocuous when it's announced, but has an enormous impact. The latest HMRC stats showed that the combination of all those things, when we get to 2027, 28, will be generating £30 billion of income. That's the estimate from the OBR, and of course they never get their estimates wrong, but you know, it's a lot of money. And these things, when they happen, don't really seem that big. If conversation goes quiet down the pub or the wine bar or wherever you are at any point, then you can, did you know the government gets 60% of its tax from 3 taxes and 70% from 4 taxes? And no surprises what those taxes are, basically income tax, NIC, VIC and corporation tax. That's where they come from. Inheritance tax, which is something you'll be talking about today, gets people very angry, really angry, but it contributes such a small amount. It's going up. The stats that were released by HMRC most recently showed that there was quite a material increase in inheritance tax. Over 7 billion a year being produced, but compared to what's produced from income tax and VAT, it isn't that much. Carry on with that, we've done that. Tax guy have done that. I've done corporation tax. Just stop on that for just a minute. Any of you who run your business as a company will be very well aware of this, or have clients who are corporate clients. The corporation tax rate has gone up if your profits are over £250,000. It does mean, I'm sure Claire will refer to this, is when you make contributions to pensions, if you're in that zone or in that odd marginal relief area between 50 and 250, then the rate of relief you get is even more appealing because the tax rate is even more appealing. Short point to make here is also important. We've been asked this a couple of times, and that is, doesn't that mean the tax rate on onshore bonds, on policyholder funds, has gone up as well? And the answer is no, because that tax rate is anchored to the basic rate of tax by legislation, not the corporation tax rate. So that means it stays at 20. And of course, it's 0 on dividends, which is quite a good thing for onshore bonds. All of that, I think, another book, well, this has been written about in a few places, but the Charles Handy book, The Age of Unreason. Anyone read that? It's about the dangers of not recognising sort of creeping change and then having to deal with the consequences of that because you didn't realise it when it seemed not that big as it went along, really. And I think that's the strategy that the government have adopted. Why boiling frog? Because apparently, according to this myth, if you have someone's nodding there, so if you haven't done this, you haven't actually done this, if you have a frog and you put it in lukewarm water and gradually, who would do this, basically? Then you turn the temperature up, then it doesn't get out because it gets a bit comfortable and you don't realise the danger until it's too late. And the analogy here with the government is that if they announce we're going to get 30 billion out of you lot all at once, that would be quite dramatic. It would be like dropping the frog into boiling water and we'd all go, ah, and try and get out. We wouldn't like it. When it's gradual, you still end up with the same impact. The frog still dies or we still pay the tax, but you don't really care so much about it. You don't feel so, I'm maybe not explaining that right, but you get what I'm saying, really. As I said, don't try this at home. Apparently some scientists actually have disproved the myth who said, oh no, but if you do find the frog does wriggle a lot and tries to get out, even when you turn it up by that much. Okay, right, who did that experiment? So boiling frog, we'll leave it with that. You get what I'm saying. Here's some numbers again also to use. They've been updated, sadly, since I did these slides, only very recently, but we're broadly in the ballpark. These changes make huge differences to the amount of taxpayers, the amount of higher rate taxpayers, the number of additional rate taxpayers, because remember that 150 has dropped to 125, 140. It makes a huge difference to the amount of people paying tax, the amount of people paying higher rate tax. Those latest HMR stats show that we are moving towards 20% of the tax-paying community being higher or additional rate taxpayers, which is shocking generally, but quite good from a financial planner standpoint, I suppose, because the greater the tax paying, the more people want to do something about relieving it. Now, some more stats. That's the additional rate threshold. Some more stats. Basically, the impact of the freeze on dividend tax. That affects huge numbers. Dividend tax, and that impacts on our decision-making on wrapper choice. Doesn't it? It really does, because that drop is like a stone, isn't it? 2 to 1 to 5, and the same for CGT. When we get that number, not so many people pay capital gains tax, but the reduction of the allowance from 12.3 to 6 to 3 is going to make a Massive difference, and it does make a big difference, the number of people who are concerned about capital gains tax and will pay it. And then there is personal allowances, what they would have been if they had been increased. You can see the difference is quite big. If CPI had been applied to those allowances, by the time we get to 27, 28, they would have been at that level, not sticking at 12,570 where they are now, not sticking at, I'm going to kick that over, at the additional rate threshold, not sticking, just massive differences. And also on the nil rate band, which has been frozen for ages, and the residence nil rate band, look at what it should be now, and look at what it will be, or should be, with CPI estimated into the future when we get to 27, 28. Dramatically different to what it is now. All of that stuff means more people get dragged into paying tax, more people get dragged into paying more tax, more people should be concerned about tax, basically. So big advert for tax planning, basically. So I'll move on from that because that's Claire's bit. Then to that point on Labour and what it might mean, precious little to go on. Obviously, we try to keep up to date. We commit to keeping up to date on this kind of stuff within TechLink, as hopefully users know. Obviously, we've got no manifestos yet. We've got a few statements made and some consistent statements made. On non-dom taxation is the most obvious one to say, we will do something about non-dom taxation. What does that mean? We don't know yet. The estimate is if they do something about it, it will generate £3.6 billion. We all know that in theory that will happen. In practice, it probably won't because people change their behaviours when tax gets a bit too harsh. They do, generally. But there could be a dramatic reduction, for example, in the deemed domicile rules, to be deemed domicile much quicker than you are now. There could be a complete sweeping away of the remittance basis, maybe, for the first period or for those periods when you have to pay for it. That could go completely, who knows? But Labour seem pretty consistently committed to doing something about non-dom taxation. Without getting political, it sounds good. It's something that most people would agree with generally, unless you're a non-dom, but generally the voting public would go, yeah, that's a good thing. And of course they'll use, they say, the money that they save to apply to good sort of public purposes. So that's, how are you going to do that? Oh, well, one thing we do is that, and we get it from them and we play it over there. So there's been consistency on that. We need to watch out for that. Rachel Reeves recently, on a trip to Washington, stopped off at New York, gave an interview to the FT at Hudson Yards, great place to do your shopping if you go to New York, and said, interestingly, I have no plans, very specifically actually, as the joke said, I have no plans to introduce a special tax on FT readers. Ha ha ha, that was the joke. The second bit was, I have no plans to tax capital gains in the same way as income, which was a big fear when the OTS report came out and had that as one of the possible recommendations. Said, I'm not going to do that. So whilst that's not in the manifesto, it's kind of on the record. It was an interesting bit of guidance. And also, no plans to dramatically reduce the benefits of pensions for higher rate taxpayers. Ah, okay, that's another interesting thing to have heard said. We'll be doing something about private equity. Probably, carried interest and all of that. Another thing like non-doms, that most people aren't in the private equity business to go, yeah, good, okay, do that. And generally help working people, as you'd expect, really. Also no plans to do anything much about corporation tax. So that's what we've heard so far. Nothing said about a wealth tax. The Conservatives are definitely nowhere near a wealth tax. We had the Wealth Tax Commission a few years back, which wasn't a government body, made some interesting proposals. Not interesting if you realise they were proposing that you'd pay a wealth tax of 5% on everything over 500,000, literally everything, including your pension and your house. So no one's gone with that. Labour have made no mention of it. Slightly worryingly, Spain have a solidarity tax, a special tax for 2 years that applies basically a 3% tax on everything over 3 million, roughly speaking. So that's quite a low bar. So there is a precedent for it, but I'm not particularly worried about it. Inheritance tax and capital taxation, you'd expect it to be looked at, but nothing's been said. So there we are. We commit to keep you as up to date as you can be on rumours and hopefully more solid news that we have as the story continues. So the last bit, okay, what we're going to do about it, what does all this mean? Quite simply, it means that the attraction of tax sheltering and tax wrappers go up. When the outside world gets harsher, the wrapper and the protection you get goes up, obviously, definitely. doesn't it? Don't forget all of those allowances. We must use them. We must think about each year. Run a tax health check each year is something that's a good thing to think about doing with your clients. Even though the CGT exemption has gone down, even though the dividend allowance has gone down, it's still there, so worth at least thinking about using, although it's becoming less and less, helpful and useful. It also means it lowers the threshold, honestly believe this, above which you consider investment bonds for their tax sheltering capabilities, basically. When you can get 2,000 of dividends, when you can get your CGT exemption, 12,300 properly managed, you could be looking at some fairly significant portfolios that won't generate tax, in which case you don't need the tax management and tax sheltering of bonds. But as those amounts drop, then the bar, all the theory around deciding wrappers remains roughly the same. But the bar above which you're worth considering, onshore, offshore bonds, whatever's best for the particular client, definitely drops. That's definitely my opinion on this. And we've done some work around TechLink on bulletins on this too. That if you were just anchoring to the dividends, when the dividend allowance was £2,000, you could have 55,600, very precise. At that, FTSE yield would give you a tax-free dividend. Then this year, that drops to 27.8, half, because the dividend allowance has dropped, and it drops again to there. So that's what I mean about the bar. Before you go, it's not tax-free anymore, maybe I should consider tax management. And it's more and more important for bigger sums, of course. I love this slide. I'm not going to dwell on it, but it's also available in TechLink. But this just takes a more granular approach to, but bonds don't just have dividends in them to drive the growth, do they? And the answer is no, they don't. They have capital gains and they have savings income interest in them as well. And this just takes an approach to saying, actually, where's the best place for that money to be, for that money flow to flow into, to give you the best outcome, taking account of internal tax of the fund or the wrapper you're looking at and the eventual tax that the individual pays. It's a very interesting piece of work that's been done by the team, so have a look at that. And let's not forget, without anchoring too much on bonds, we've been asked this a few times, and we had to do a bit of research. When did that happen? That's long-standing stuff. If clients are worried about, that 5% allowance seems like a good thing, or that top slicing seems amazing, doesn't it? Even though, actually, the OTS referred to that principle. When they said we could tax capital gains as income, they said we would also perhaps have to think about introducing something like what they've got with bonds, or to spread the gain, divide the gain by the number of years it's accrued over. A bit unfair to have the gain that's accrued over many years, all taxed in 1 year, shooting you right through all the thresholds in the year you're in cash. So there's been a little corroboration. But they've been with us for a long while. A few extra, not a lot of people know that points. What's this one? Intergenerational, obviously really important, to take an intergen approach for those of your clients who have families and like their families or are in families, then definitely worth doing. And from a business standpoint, statement of the obvious, clearly it makes sense to you to do that, doesn't it? To have a business that has relationships across the generations and has, really important this, has been intentional about the way in which they communicate with those different generations. Really, really important to take that into account too, to make yourself completely relatable. So there's a win-win. It's definitely beneficial to the client to take that approach. Not easy, I know. A lot of it's down to communication and challenges around communication, but also really important for your business value, in my opinion. As a buyer, if you see the client base is spread across many generations as opposed to all anchored to the over 60s, then that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it, generally, for the business value. Estate planning, you'll be hearing about this today, so no detail on this from me, except to say that we are big devotees to taking an all-asset approach to estate planning, as I know you will be. This isn't news anymore, but when we're looking at decumulation also and estate planning, we look at all the assets. You have to look at everything, not just the financial assets, including property, increasingly, always been important to people, their property, their buy-to-let properties, their second homes, all of that, and the challenges and sometimes opportunities around planning with those asset classes. And let's not forget also, please forget protection and the important role that it can play in creating a legacy, providing for inheritance tax. So important, I think, and something that we, in our all-consuming sort of focus on wealth creation and wealth management, sometimes forget. So you know how it works. It used to be, here we are in the CIR, it's the first thing you do, in your hierarchy of needs. Maslow-like approach to financial planning. Get your protection in place first. And that seems to have faded a little bit. I think we should do more of it. And also a fantastic way, once you've explored all the IHT planning that you will discuss in detail today, then providing for the liability for some will represent an acceptable alternative to giving stuff away, or a part of the overall solution once you've done all you can do practically on the giving away side. Again, lots of reminders in there. So the last bit, what? So that was our why, and a bit around the how, and a lot of detail on the how we do financial planning. Support. So TechLink, you'll be very aware of, this is what we do. And this will be hopefully reminders to all of you, but for some of you, and this happened at our last conference, I remember, oh, I didn't know you did that. Oh, we did mention it, yeah, but I get so much stuff that I didn't realise that's what you did. So just to take this little bit of time to go, look, TechLink, within TechLink, you have a library, fully searchable. Talk to Scott about TechLink. If you want to know about TechLink, he is the man to talk. Scott, Lucy, and Derek, you're not getting off. In fact, any of the team talks about TechLink, but those in particular. Library bulletins, video content, podcasts, fully searchable, and CPD tracking. And it is fully accredited by the CII. Here we are now. So every moment you spend on TechLink counts towards your CPD. So maybe I shouldn't say this, but the slower you read, the more CPD you get, basically. There you are. Ask, extra service, extra cost, but really, really valued by our clients that use it. I know that because I don't know if you can get anything like Ask anywhere else in the sector. And that sounds, don't boast. I am going to boast because it's great. The team that answers are fantastic, and the answers that you get, I'll challenge anyone to say, actually, I don't believe that. That's brilliant. So the ability to ask technical questions on case-related subjects on your clients is there under the Ask service. If you haven't got that and are interested in having a look at it, have a look at it, ask about it, and you've got the full archive of past questions to look at, all anonymised. So valuable that is these days. Communicator, bi-weekly content produced for you to send to your clients, all completely vanilla, not TechLink branded. And professional connections, basically on stuff that will be relevant for them, broken down by the areas of their lives that they might be interested in. So kind of saw this and thought of you approach to it, you know, for parents, for homeowners, for business owners, for estate planners, for retirees, people planning to retire. Great stuff, have a look at that. And the same for professional connections. So taking the legwork out of regular, relevant, relatable communication is what Communicator is. Something else you can have a look at and a trial of. The wrapper tool, especially given what I've just talked about, and you all know about, those changes to tax rates, the dropping of the threshold above which you should consider wrappers. When I say wrappers, we're considering here onshore and offshore funds, collectives basically, and onshore and offshore bonds. Put any portfolio in it and this wrapper tool, and you put your tax variables in, both in relation to your assumptions in relation to the fund, and your assumptions, most importantly, in relation to your current and future tax position. Hours of endless fun playing with this, but the outcomes are great. And it's a really good training tool because it gets you to think about, for your team, to think about, oh, how are bonds taxed? How are collectives taxed? How is the flow of dividend tax? It reminds you of all of that because of the detailed notes behind it. And the outcomes you get, you can just change them, vary them all the time. So you will get a tax-based, it's completely charge neutral, so it doesn't take account of charges, it just focuses on the tax determinants of where to put that investment portfolio to deliver the best outcome based on the assumptions that you input. If any of you haven't got any of these things and want to have a go of them, just let us know because we can set up a trial and see what you think. And the last to be launched today is our international guide, which I'm particularly pleased about. It's been a long time in the making. We've worked with McDermott, Will & Emery, a global law firm, to produce a guide to the taxation of pretty much anything you buy, any financial product that you would buy in the UK, including financial products in trust, including EIS, including VCT, so loan trust, DGTs, ordinary policies in trust, pensions, DC and DB, bonds onshore and offshore, collective investments, anything you might have bought in the UK and you go to live in another country or retire to another country or go to work in another country, how will that stuff you've bought be taxed in that other country? So it'll either be that's interesting or actually very valuable. And our aim is really not to be international tax experts, but just to say, to stop you to our point of why, so that you aren't the advisor when your client says, oh God, if I moved to France, how would that be taxed? If I moved to Australia, how would my offshore bond be taxed? And you go, actually, in Australia, if you've held the bond for 10 years, then it will be completely free of tax when you cash it in, even if it's an onshore or an offshore bond. And that 10 years doesn't have to be 10 years in Australia, a little snippet of what we cover. It's just basically completely tax-free. So the bond I bond is what you want to consider if you're going to Australia. So all interesting stuff like that, and hugely valuable stuff, and really important, kept up to date as well. So also additional fee, but if you want to have a look at how that works, let us know. And of course, in the middle of that is where we started effectively, consultancy, on pretty much anything to do with tax and legal, special projects basically on that. Content creation, talked a bit about that, which we do in a scalable sense with Communicator, but content creation for your clients, for the advisors you serve, we can certainly work with you on that. We have clients in the room now, I know who we do that with, hopefully to good effect. Client events, if you want us to help you create them or deliver them, we can also work with you on that, live or even easier, obviously easier, through webinar. Professional connection events, if that's something you're going to work with as well, that's also something we can help you with by working with you on that to create the content. And if you want to deliver or co-deliver with you, lots of experience on that now, and lots of great people to do that. Advisor events too, if you're a provider, a platform, someone who serves the advisor market, can help you with that, help you contribute to those, deliver them with you or without you. And general professional development and testing. So professional development on any particular subject that you'd expect us to be involved with, and the testing regime to go with that if you want it. All of those things we do. There's the testing bit. And there's more as well, and proposition development. That's been our history for many, many years, since being involved in what I think was the first loan-only loan trust. That's the kind of thing we get involved in and love to be involved in. Innovation too. So all of that is, if you thought, I forgot you did that, or I'm interested in that, we're here all day. Please feel free to talk about unashamed plugs for Technical Connection, but I'm proud to do it. So thank you for listening to that. I've unbelievably not really overrun, have I? That's incredible. Right. I'll be around all day, as all the team will be. So we'll do questions throughout the day, shall we, rather than do it now? Anytime today, any questions, let's have a chat. And it'll be good to talk to you anyway. So my work is over. I'm now going to enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you, everyone. Cheers. I'm good. Thanks.